Hey everyone, this is week 31, day 5. This is Friday. This is our last day of our ongoing presence week. So I think we've had an awesome week just trying to search for those little clues of where we can find evidence of our passing by, those moments that reflect upon our actions. I think it's been a very beautiful week. Let's see if we can close it off with a really nice painting. So thank you guys for hanging out. Remember, next week, new theme. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. This is going to be our 5th day, our final day on our presence week. And remember, what we've been trying to do is find some sort of hint, a little bit of evidence of an action that took place. Now, that act could have been committed by a complete stranger, or it could have been done by us just moments before we started contemplating this effect of this act, which ultimately is going to be translated into painting. In that sense, throughout the week, we reflected upon the mound of earth, the pile of dirt, and how somebody could have shoveled that dirt, taken it from somewhere and displaced it and rearranged it into this artificial mound of earth. On Tuesday, we saw how this tiny little action of placing this taut piece of aluminum foil on a plate describe an action of taking care of something, about prolonging the life of something. On Wednesday, it was the tiniest movement, the press of a button, and this light, this tiny little LED light, this warm light amongst this cooler atmosphere, signifying this tiny little press of a button that meant that water was going to be boiled and it was going to be used for probably making a cup of tea. On Thursday, we realized that the subject matter, the subject of our gaze, the subject of our contemplation could be one where we have, I'm not going to say no empathy for it. It's not about apathy. There's no connection. We are not really moved by the subject matter in itself. But the act could be a reminder. The act of having plucked these flowers, placed them in a little bottle that was acting as a vase, and trying to decorate a space that was going to be temporary housing for us, pointed to the fact that all these actions were taken by a stranger. It was clearly somebody who is outside of our sensibility, and how even though we may not be moved by the effect of those actions, but we acknowledge that we were temporarily inhabiting a place where we don't belong. And we tried to find clues as to how that manifested. So yes, it was a still life. Yes, it was just a little bottle with some flowers, but it was the catalyzer to speak about something that was broader. And it was a very scary painting for me, as I said yesterday, because tackling something that is not directly involving you, where you're not sensibly moved by. I could have lied and said, oh, they were beautiful flowers that somebody placed in this room that I was going to stay in, and I just wanted to paint them. I would have been lying. It would have been a complete dishonesty on my part. And I think this process, and I think life is just about being honest with oneself. So I didn't find those flowers in that context, and I want to make that clear, in that context, beautiful. That it was not the reason that I wanted to then make a painting out of them. It was the fact that this was foreign to me. This was not me. So how do you paint something that is not you? And how do we find a way to make us not feel dirty about painting something that is not us? I think that was yesterday's exercise. It may seem weird because we usually associate that exercise perhaps with heavier subject matter, with us trying to speak about a problem that we're not touched by, but we feel we can have a voice in it. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have to stand back and let other people whose voice hasn't been heard speak about those very problems. It is not up to us to always speak about everything. Sometimes we have to just willingly stand back and just be avid listeners and place ourselves in a position where we are going to learn. But thankfully, this was using flowers, but it was speaking about being away from home, being away from the things that you're comfortable with and close to, and perhaps just a tiny, tiny little reminder that this is not an action that you would have taken. So it was pretty cool. How do we paint something that's not us? I thought that was very cool. I always imagined that if I was going to paint a flower, it would have been in a very different context. I always imagined that I would be working for a gallery, and for some reason, in some part of a painting I did, there was a hint of some flowers or some vegetation or something, and a buyer or a collector spoke with the gallery director, and maybe she was like, hey, there's interest in you doing some still lifes, perhaps some floral still lifes. Would you be willing to do that? I think there's a market in there. And, me probably thinking that the money was good, I would bend and I would start doing these flower paintings, and they would come out, so. But then I would feel horrible because I'm like, why did I paint this? I never wanted to paint this. I did it for the money. I'm terrible. And then I give them to the gallery director, and maybe they never sell. And then I feel worse because I'm like, God, I actually did this just for the money. But now that they haven't sold, I feel like an idiot. I've lost my time. I betrayed myself. I'm horrible. So that's how I thought about me painting flowers. So that was not the case yesterday. But today, thankfully, we are dealing with a subject matter that is very close to me. It's perhaps one of the things that is as close to me thinking about Danny or my mother or Samu and Fer, the people that I keep closest to me and that I love dearly. This is what I consider home. This is the space that I grew up in, and this is the house I know by heart. You could blindfold me in the entrance of my home, and I don't really think I would bump into anything. I think that place, the geography of that space, the placement of every single one of the objects that compose my home is just etched into my brain. I know exactly where things are, and I just know those spaces by heart. I've traveled through those spaces thousands, hundreds of thousands of times. This is something that's very, very close to me, as close as a space can be to me. So every time I go back to my mother's house and I considered making a painting about a small moment of our house, I always feel it's a wonderful opportunity to just think about the space that it's most familiar to me, the space that I really feel a connection to. And I feel that when we speak about inhabiting a place, this is a place that I think I belong to. This is a place that I can always go back to. So I'm always very, very happy. I'm painting the wooden floors, and this is on the second floor. This is like right outside my room, which when I came back from studying in the US, I went back to my old room, and as soon as I opened the door, like if I was painting in my room, as soon as I opened the door, I would look at this. This would be my view. It would be the floor and then the stairs right in front of me just to go downstairs. The thing is, for the longest time, maybe for 16, 17 years, we had carpets all over our house. Every room had a carpet. The stairs had a carpet. It was just carpet everywhere. Not the kitchen, obviously, not bathrooms, obviously, but just all these spaces had carpet. I guess it was in fashion 45 years ago, whatever. But at some point, a carpet is just like this thing that collects dust. And we were just so tired of it. My mother was like, oh, I hate this. This is horrible. We just have to rip this carpet out, because underneath that carpet was the original carpet. So it was one very thick carpet on top of another carpet. And my mother was just like, no, this is horrible. This is getting dirty and dusty. Let's just rip it out. And I was so excited. I was like, are we doing this? We're doing this, right? And we didn't say anything to my father. My father wasn't there. And with my sisters, I remember I just took like scissors and a box cutter, and I went to town. I was like, we're doing this. I'm ripping this carpet off. And so essentially, we ripped off the carpet of the stairs. There was ceramic tiles underneath there. And we were like, oh my God, there's tiles underneath here. This is so cool. This is amazing. And it was the same tiles that there was at the entrance of the house. And my mother was like, oh, this looks so beautiful. So we ripped those off. Taking the carpet off the stairs was absolutely wonderful. Although I remembered when I would roll on my belly down the stairs when I was a little kid. So that was a nice memory of having carpet on the stairs. But anyways, we ripped that out. And then we went to the second floor and we started ripping everything out. And we actually wanted to rip the old carpet out because it had like a horrible orangish color. I mean, I think my parents moved in there maybe 1979-ish, maybe. I was probably 2. So just think of a carpet late 70s. And of course, it's gaudy and horrible. So it was this ochreish, orangish, thin carpet. It was terrible. I mean, it had some glue on top of it because they had glued like the second carpet that was put on top. It was a mess. But at least my mother's like, oh no, I hated that other carpet. It was full of stains. I'm making it sound like my house was just pigsty, but no, of course I'm exaggerating. But we ripped that off and it was terrible. It looked terrible, but at least it wasn't the other carpet. So we were pretty happy. And after a little bit, I guess as soon as my dad saw that we had ripped all of that stuff off, they were like, we might as well just rip that carpet off and eventually just put some wooden floors. And that was pretty amazing. It just changed the whole aesthetic of my house and it just made everything look incredibly different. The tone of the house just changed completely. If you've ever had wooden floors put on your house, you know that the sanding of that is just a mess. I mean, this is apocalyptic. If a sandstorm had suddenly appeared on the horizon and had swallowed my house, whole, and then spit it out, there would have been less particles in my house than after the sanding of that floor. It was terrible. I mean, I put like thick industrial grade plastic on top of everything. There's an archway going to my mother's living room downstairs. And I actually covered that whole archway with a ton of tape and this very thick industrial plastic. And you know what? Those tiny little dust particles, they don't care about tape. They don't care about plastic. They'll go everywhere. I remember it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And just cleaning that, vacuuming all that dust was just insane. I remember years later, years after they had put the wooden floors, out of the corner of my eye, look at a spot that I had missed when I was trying to clean everything. And there it was, all that reddish dust from the sanding of the floor. I mean, if I go there now, it would be like an archaeologist just trying to find a place where where that little dusting of wood still remains. If this was Gattaca, they would for sure find some particles of of our wooden floor. Anyways, that's the transition that we made towards this very beautiful reddish, orangish wooden floor. But that was very temporary because we've always had dogs in that house. And it doesn't matter how much you try to take care of a wooden floor. If you have dogs, they're going to ruin everything. And I just remember, I think it was Simon, our golden retriever. He used to just slip and slide on that floor. And every time he was just slipping and sliding, all his nails would just dig into that floor. And it would start scratching and scratching and scratching the floor. Now, we've always had this idea that we can have it sanded down at some point again. But no, that's never going to happen. That was such a mess. That was such a horrible time that I don't think my mother will ever do that. So the best that we can do is just kind of clean the floor and wax the floor and make it kind of shiny. But the truth is, the wood shows wear, and it has all these markings of just transit, be it our current dog, which is an Aussie Shepherd, which is Tyson, that some of you may be familiar with, that I've painted. He's my sister's dog, but he lives in my mother's house. There's for sure all these like scratch marks that he's done, and there's our marks, the marks that we have done while we've traversed through this house for years and years and years. When I was thinking about presents, I immediately thought, yeah, that floor is just perfect because it speaks about our passing from one room to the next, or in some cases in my life where I've lived there, then I've left, then I've lived there again, then I leave, then I live there again, then I go back. I also used my old room as a studio for many years. So I'm always super happy to go back to my mother's house. That to me has never been a problem. That's actually where someone fair meet with their cousins. And that's where me and my sisters and my mom just gather for lunch on weekends. And I love my house. I love that place. It's the place where we come together. So to me, that's huge. I understand it as family. That house to me is a synonym for family. When I saw this wooden floor that has this reflection of this little kind of skylight that is right above the staircase and giving me this beautiful, cool reflection, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And it's going to be a little bit different from the other paintings in the sense that I think the effect of the action in the other paintings was easily recognizable. It may have been, like on Wednesday's painting, a super small action, which was just the press of a button. But today, it was a little bit different because it wasn't going to be about something being evident, about something being easily identifiable. It is about seeing these tiny little marks that are on the floor that speak about wear and tear. And I didn't want to exaggerate them. I didn't want to take that as an idea and just push it and just, kind of emphasize all these track marks throughout the wooden floor. No, I was going to paint what was there. I wasn't going to try and fake it. I liked the fact that in terms of the existence of that evidence, it was really cool to see that there's an incredibly broad spectrum where we can just say, okay, I'm going to place myself here because I'm more comfortable doing this subject matter, or this is closest to my sensitivity. But in my case, because this is an exercise, I wanted to explore some of the possibilities within that spectrum. And today's probably one that is very, very quiet. And I like that. I really, really like that. I feel that we don't always have to exhibit clearly what we are talking about. Sometimes it could be like a tiny little hidden gem. And I actually love those paintings that you have to kind of uncover. I think this is one of them. And I'm very, very happy that I let myself work on this very abstract painting with this weird perspective. It's the geometry of these shapes just creates this very nice abstract rhythm to this painting. And then essentially it's just about the coolness of that light on top of the redness, warmness of that wood, and how that coolness is kind of interrupted. The wholeness of that coolness is interrupted by these little scuff marks sprinkled here and there. And that was enough. I didn't want to overdo it. So as soon as I felt that that little bit of imprint was there in the painting, I was like, yes, that's it. I'm done. This is exactly what I wanted to paint. So I'm very happy that I got to that point. But anyways, that was it for this week. It was a pretty cool theme. It was very nice trying to define something first, then exploring the possibilities within that definition, and then trying to find moments in nature, moments in my experiences that could echo those definitions. So, this was a very cool week. For next week, we are going to do something completely new. But, a lot of you guys have spoken about the formal part of painting, and I guess you guys miss the fact that you can't see my palette while I'm painting, and that's something that's totally understandable. That's something that I'm always interested in as a painter too. So we're going to concentrate on that next week. So we're going to go back to a palette. We're going to go back to a very simple palette. It's not going to be the typical 4-color palette, but we're going to do a primary color palette. And you guys are going to see me pick my primary hues together with white, and we're going to see the possibilities that are within that tiny little palette, and I think that's going to be pretty cool. So the palette view is going to make a comeback for next week, and we'll see how that goes. As always on Fridays, Danny and I thank you very, very much. We are super grateful that you let us be your company during this week. And we invite you for next week where we'll have a whole new theme. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye.